So, Marian, could you talk a little bit about kind of where you got the idea that you wanted to translate this book, or how you first encountered Maidenhair? What made you want to work on it?
I had translated 2 pieces by Mikhail before, one for Two Lines issue, and one for Words Without Borders. And I knew that we had a lot of stylistic affinity, that I thought I really understood his voice and what made it beautiful, and that this was something that was probably a very good match for me as a translator. As to the novel itself, I was actually rather reluctant to translate it. I was asked to translate it. I was reluctant because I knew that I was going to need a lot of help. It's a book, this whole thing about is it difficult, is it not difficult? It's not difficult when you read it. As you read it, it's just absolutely lovely. It's beautiful. There's nothing difficult about reading any sentence in the book. Why you just switched from the Persian Wars to the Swiss border might not be clear at first. And the change of voices, there's many different registers. I like doing that, so that was also something that appealed to me. But I was reluctant at first, but because I had already worked with Mikhail, and I knew what kind of support I was going to get. I got incredible support from him, and really, I needed it.
He gave you some notes to work with?
Yeah, he gave me some notes.
How many pages of notes?
He gave me about 40 pages of notes. For those,
but
I know there are many.
It was not the first translation.
No, let me tell you. Yeah, well,
to work with other translators.
Yes, well, but there are many translators in the audience, and you are going to just love this man when you hear this. He gave me a document that included all the questions from all the translators before me, with his answers, often extensive answers, in page order. So I would get to a page and there would be something, and I would think, something's going on here that I'm not getting. I mean, I usually know when I'm not getting something, and then I look and someone would have it. It would also had things in it that I didn't need, like apparently in Norwegian, if something is upstairs, you have to know if it's on the 2nd floor or the 3rd floor. So the Norwegian question was, which floor is this? That was not my question. But most of the questions were quite relevant to me, yes.
So Mikhail said something interesting. His second novel in English has just been published in the UK, and it'll be available in the US later in the year, The Light in the Dark. And he said that, I guess there were 3 different translators who wanted to work on this book, or who had given samples. And he said, my experience is quite different. A sample translation of The Light in the Dark, made by 3 independent translators, had no single phrase alike. This does not mean to say that translations are good or bad. It is simply how it is. I can only help the translators with an overall understanding of a Russian text, and then I have to leave them alone to struggle with their own language. And I guess in light of knowing that, and you, Marian, said that you felt that you had a personal connection with this book, do you feel like you kind of understood the voice in a way that you were going to produce a very personal response to it that was going to be a good translation in English?
In those 40 pages, there's also a little admonition at the beginning about how the translator needs to use the language that the translator is writing in. I mean, this is something translators, obviously he's a translator, know. And I felt that this was a book that you could really run with, using a lot of things that English can do that maybe have nothing to do with Russian. And there are a lot of neologisms, there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's a certain amount of playing with language. There's it was an extremely creative process, I have to say that. And there was only one, and in that admonition it said, if you can't really, I'm paraphrasing, but if you can't really make this English and make it wonderful in English, then just leave it out. If this just does not work in English, is correct what you said to me.
Yes.
So I'm happy to say there was just one thing that I could not, I don't know if my brain was fried, but I still have not found an answer to it. There's one missing sentence, one missing aspect to it. And this is a sentence that I read it and it made no sense to me, absolutely none. But I went to my guide and I found the page and I read it, and it turned out that this sentence was a mnemonic device used in Russian to tell you which words have a double N and which don't. Well, I have never seen, we have mnemonic devices, but they're not like a sentence. We'll have, I before E or something like that. But I have never found or ever found, I say this to many people, hoping that someone will actually know of such a thing in English. I don't think that we have that in English. So that remains, it's like a Persian carpet. There's something wrong there. And we could always go back and, if I could ever come up with that sentence.
So one last thing, Marion, I wanted to ask you about. I found an interview where you talk about you make 4 passes through a book, and the last pass you described as last but not least, I find someone to read the entire translation out to me out loud while I follow along with the Russian, a kind of failsafe. If I can't get a live person, I use reading software whose pace I can adjust and which works all kinds of crazy hours, which I guess a living person wouldn't do. So did you actually do that final pass with the entirety of this book?
With a person, yes.
Wow. Who was that person?
My brother, who is actually a very fine writer, and he's about the only person I really completely trust as an editor and a reader. So, we read the whole thing through out loud. I think a translation really has to be read out loud at the end. It's amazing what you find and what you, I 4 times, it's not that I do it 4 times, I do it 8 times. It's just 4 different kinds of times. There's 4 different stages that I can identify. But there are many books I've gone through at least 8 times. And one of those times just has to be, you could have done it 8 times already, and then you read it out loud and you find something else. So that's more or less something I don't think I realized as a younger translator, but now I'm pretty much attached to.
So, Mikhail, how long were you at work on this book before you were satisfied that it was complete? Like how many years kind of reading this text?
You see, I'm not professional. I'm a professional writer, because a professional writer must write 1 book a year or 2 years or maximum 3 years, and I write 1 book in 5 or 6 years. Yeah? It's not professional at all. Actually, there are 2 types of writers. Yeah? The master of the novel and the servant of the novel. The master wakes up, and after breakfast, he takes the bell, he rings the bell, and the novel is running. Master, what will we write today? Yeah? And the master is dictating. And I'm the servant of the novel. I'm sitting and waiting for the bell. And then I hear the bell and I'm running. My master, what will we write today? And he is dictating, and it's absolutely wonderful, because the master is always, you see, cleverer than the servant. I don't have to think, why should I write this or why should I not write this? Just writing. Yeah? The main advantage of this is that I just have to obey. Yeah? I don't think. When he the master says, so that's the end of the novel, it's the end, yeah, and the disadvantage is a servant could sit and wait for the bell, and wait, and wait, and 1 year, and 2 years, and 3 years, nothing comes, and then it could be very unpleasant. Yeah, it could be very unpleasant. So, I worked on this novel actually my whole life, and I started it. No, it's impossible to say when I started because all the stories. I'm not professional because I can't invent stories. So I just write what was in my life. So what was with my parents, what was with my mom, with my brother, and so on. And yeah. So and actually about 5 years just writing down. Yeah.
Are you a master or a servant of the Russian language?
I hate Russian. I hate Russian because it's my enemy. The Russian language is my enemy. Yeah? I'm struggling against it my whole life. Actually, I realized what Russian language is when I was 15 maybe. I wanted to make my first love declaration. I came up to my girl. She didn't know that she's my girl. And I came up and opened my mouth to tell her that what, yeah. And then I opened my mouth and I was paralyzed because I realized what I feel is impossible to express in words because all words are dead. The language is dead. You can't say anything in this language. Yeah? And actually that, with this realizing, begins the writer, I think. Yeah? And then what you have to do is to resurrect words, to give them the life back. And so, with these resurrected words, you can talk about love again. What is writer doing is just resurrecting words, giving them life back. And actually, I love working with the translators, but I can help them just to understand the book in the way which a normal Russian reader can understand the book. After that, I can't help them anymore, and they have to struggle against their enemies, against their languages, yeah? As I do in struggling against Russian, to say anything, to resurrect words. And so 4 times I succeeded, just 4 times, with 4 novels. And will my translators succeed or not? Who knows? I can only pray.
You've talked a lot about the experience of living outside of Russia. It kind of gave you a separation from the country and from the language where you could begin to see it anew. But I guess you head back to Russia every now and then. Do you keep up kind of what's happening with the language, what's happening with the literature, or do you try to resist getting back into that?
No. For me as a writer, it was very important to leave my country. Now I see it was the crucial point, actually, because I think it's very important for everybody not to spend his whole life in his own country, but to live abroad, not just for a couple of months as a tourist, but for some years. If you don't do this, I compare it just with living in a house without mirrors, without looking glass. You can't understand yourself. So living abroad helps you to understand what is your background, what is your country, what is your language, what is your history, what is your nation, everything, yeah? And in Russia, the language in the last years is changing very quickly because last 20 years, yeah? Such changes in the life. So, and I compare the changing of Russian language in the last 20 years with the running train. Russian is just like running train. And the writer must be in the train. It could be engineer, yeah, or it could be without ticket somewhere, yeah, sitting in the train, but it must be in the train. And if you step out on some, if you go on some station like me, yeah, the train is away. So what do you have to do? You can't catch the train anymore. Yeah? You can't run after the train. And because if you do this, it's ridiculous. Yeah? I have seen a lot of writers living in America, Russian writers living in America, in Germany, in Israel, and when they come to Moscow, they listen to all these new cool words, and then they try to use it in their stories or novels. It's ridiculous. So because you see, the language is not so. What is today very really cool? Yeah, tomorrow it's rotten. Yeah, it's not fresh anymore. And so, leaving Russia helped me to understand that are you in the train or are you not in the train? The main thing is not to run after the language, but create your own language, which will be fresh and cool always, even after you're dead. And I would come to this idea in Russia too. Just leaving Russia helped me to come to this idea much. So